Looking back on it, I think this might have actually saved my banking career.
Hey, this is Patrick Curtis, CEO and founder of Wall Street Oasis. Today we have a great chat with Aditya. Aditya came to us at the end of his first year when he had a super low GPA at the University of Toronto as an engineering student. He had really struggled that first year, was interested in finance consulting, wasn't really sure which one he was going to go after. That summer when he joined us, he realized he needed to get the GPA up and he needed a lot of help to get ready for on-cycle recruiting. Listen to how he did it. Enjoy. Aditya, thanks so much for taking the time to join us today.
Oh, thank you, Patrick. I appreciate all that you guys have done, and I'm just excited to be able to help back if I can.
So it'd be awesome if you could just give the listeners a short summary bio, where you're from, all that good stuff.
Yeah, so, hi guys, for you guys that are listening, my name's Aditya Mishra. Originally from Malaysia, but for the past 2 years, I've been attending university in Canada, specifically at the University of Toronto. My major is actually industrial engineering, which has nothing to do with finance, but we'll probably get into that a little bit further. And just for like some of my hobbies, I love playing the guitar, and I've done Taekwondo for about a bit over a decade for both of them. Yeah.
Amazing. So coming from Malaysia, tell me a little bit about the decision to come to University of Toronto.
So honestly, I think when I was evaluating the main sort of factors for picking a university, for me, it was obviously about choosing something which was very akin to Malaysia in the sense that it was a city. So that was one of the biggest factors. And then the other thing that I wanted to focus on was the opportunities that I would have. Now, there's a lot of schools within Toronto which provide like excellent opportunities. Like you have Richard Ivey, which is a very good business school, and then you also have like Queens and stuff. But for me personally, I felt like the largest alumni network, especially if I ever wanted to go global, would have been at the University of Toronto. It also helped that they're the number one ranked engineering school, but that's disputed between us and Waterloo. So, that's neither here nor there. But that was like the rationale behind me picking University of Toronto.
Fair enough. Okay, so you're going into school knowing, hey, I'm probably going to be majoring in engineering or studying engineering for the most part. Talk to me a little bit about that first year on campus. Did things shift? You're still an industrial engineering major, correct?
Yeah.
Uh,
So honestly, when I first got to campus, I definitely thought my path was going to be a lot more industrial engineering, but I ended up just going around the club fairs like a lot of students do. And finance has always been in my life. I have an uncle who works in the finance industry. He works for one of the big banks. When I was in high school, I wrote a stupid paper on how interest rates affect JP Morgan stocks. It's a pretty logical, you can make that connection really quickly, but I thought I could use Bayesian statistic analysis to probably construct a better, more refined approach. Wasn't true. So it was always on my mind. It was like finance and consulting, they're relatively high paying careers, but also they're just careers where get that early on exposure and that training, which can be valuable.
Yep.
But I didn't know whether I wanted to do it. And I felt like engineering was more my path, also because my parents were pretty happy with that. And I seemed pretty interested in it, especially the physics aspect of it. I went in, walked around the club fair, and ended up seeing like the finance club for one of the people and just had a really good conversation with him. He was from Malaysia as well. He was like, why don't you just come by to our first meeting, see how it is? And then if you decide you want to join, stick around, have some fun with it. Otherwise, you don't have to. That's how that shaped up. Ended up joining the engineering finance club for a little bit. And from there, it was okay, finance and consulting, both very interesting because I also joined the consulting club.
Yep.
And then I just kept going with them towards the end of first year. And first year was hard. So I will say this. I made the mistake of sacrificing my GPA for clubs because I was like, let me get the true university experience and stuff. But ultimately, it's
How low are we talking here? Was it three
uh,
two, 3-3, 3-1, or 3-4? Like how low did it end up being that first semester? Because I know my worst semester by far was my first semester. It was like a 3.0 or something, and then I ended up with like 3.7 or 3.6 something. Is that similar to you? Like your first semester, you had one.
yeah, I would say I was a little worse off actually.
Okay.
So I ended up in that 2.7 to 3 range.
Yep.
Like obviously I got crushed. Also because when you come into engineering, most of these kids, like in fact everyone is nearly like a top scoring student. And
Yeah.
you're like, oh, this is gonna be easy. I had it easy throughout high school, and then you flat on your butt and you're just like, damn, I gotta really study now. I have to actually figure out how to study properly. And that's something that it just took me a little bit of time to figure out.
Yep.
But once I did, it was a lot better.
That first semester was you put yourself a little bit in a hole if you wanted consulting or banking or finance.
Exactly.
Talk to me a little bit about as things progressed to that second semester. Obviously, you're like, okay, I have to buckle down. I got to get a high GPA this next semester. It's going to be really tough. But was there anything else like through the clubs or through upperclassmen where you were thinking one type of finance or were you leaning any way or was it more like, hey, I'm just going to keep my options open?
Yeah, so I think I got pretty lucky early on. So there was this portal for my university. I think a lot of universities might have it. And you can just contact a bunch of alumni there. And I don't know if it's a good philosophy or not, but in my opinion, I always prefer contacting older individuals who have either been in the industry or are about to retire or have retired.
Yeah.
Because I feel like they have the most wealth of knowledge. And especially for someone like me who was pretty indecisive at that point to pick their brains and to see how their careers turned out over that span. Obviously, times are very different now, but
Yeah.
still to see, okay, they were an engineer, they went into finance, or they went into consulting, how they come out. Is this someone who I'd want to be 50, 60 years down the line? So for me, that kind of conversation was something that I was really looking for. And I got very lucky. I found a mentor very early on. So he gave me a proposition. He was like, look, you're interested in both.
Hmm.
And so we kicked that process off. And so I was leaning consulting in my second semester to answer your question. But it was really still up in the air for me because I'm a first year student. I was just interested in seeing what the world was like, starry eyed. Yeah,
Which is very normal for a first year student. So did you do any case interviews at this point?
honestly, I actually, and I think this is one of the things that, again, I'm not going to harp on about Wall Street Oasis, but this is one of the things that you guys do really well. I think that STAR framework and the seven stories and really nailing them down. Because prior to that, I walked into the interview and I got lucky in the sense that I was able to do a little bit of background on the CEO, a bit of understand the company as a whole. So when I walked into the interview, I had a vague idea of what they do. But I was able to portray myself in a way which aligned with their values and their kind of customs. But obviously, it would have been very helpful if I had something like that ready because
Yeah.
believe it or not, every question any interview I feel like ever has asked me has been a variation of those. The first two rounds were definitely more like vibe checks for them to feel it out. And then the third round was obviously a little bit of looking at my problem solving and my analysis. Wasn't a case interview, but they just asked me like a couple technical questions about how I would conduct an analysis of something specific, just to see how my brain shapes those problems.
Awesome. So you landed that role, right? For
Yeah, I
summer.
did. I did land that role.
And what you did over the summer in this consulting role and how that framed your coming into your second semester. Because I think you joined us the summer after your freshman year or after your first year.
I did. I did.
I'd love to
I was
hear
pretty
like
much finishing.
what was going on during that summer that like thought, hey, you know what, I'm going to join Academy because I think I really want to go after this thing.
Yeah. So actually, it was two parts to it. So I'll just give you a brief background about my summer. So obviously, going into consulting, there's a lot of proposal work that you get to do. And so I got to work on a lot of different proposals. Like they went from the healthcare industry to governmental sectors like oil and gas as well. And then also all the way to private equity firms, finance, and portfolio strategies that we could employ there. So I got this diverse sort of experience in these variable industries. And I was like, this is exactly what I was looking for because
Hmm.
that's what consulting gives you. It gives you that exposure to a bunch of different industries early on. So that was one of the big things that I was looking for and I found interesting. But I realized that towards like the middle of my internship, and this is how I got my introduction to Wall Street Oasis, my Excel skills were weak. They weren't really up to par. And I just remember, I think I was like either going on LinkedIn or I was scrolling somewhere. And I remember there being an ad which was like, hey, you want our free Excel workbook? You can just get your basics down.
Yeah.
And I was like, this could be very helpful for me. I'm going to do this. And I did that first course. And obviously, for someone who's coming from a background where they don't teach you Excel for sure in first year engineering, I don't think they teach you Excel like properly even in second year or like third year, but they don't teach you a lot of the basic sort of like fundamental toolkits that you might need. And so for me, the Excel course was like a godsend because it helped me like actually catch up on some of my work in the consulting internship. And it was free, which was really nice of you guys. Like you guys put it out, like the basic one. And so I
Yeah.
was like, okay, this is good. And then after that, when I was working towards the end of my internship, a lot of my work was oriented towards analyzing the finances, both. It was more complicated. It was like more of a government-based finance thing that I was looking at, but it was also private equity firms. I was working on two projects simultaneously. And I realized I was pretty drawn to the private equity projects. Like I just found them interesting. Bunch of portfolio companies. Now you have to evaluate them, look at where you can fix them. Obviously, we're looking at the consulting aspect of it, but I just found leveraging portfolio companies into greater returns and just working with them was cool. So that was around August, and that's when I had a couple more conversations with a few individuals who had gone into finance from engineering.
Mm.
And that's when it's really hit and dawned on me that it's a real path. It's something that I could do.
Yeah.
So then I obviously applied to the Wall Street Oasis thing. I was like, okay, let's like, I really thought there's probably a low chance that I'm going to get into this just because the program is catered towards making sure students can get in. And for me, I
Yeah.
knew that GPA was like an anchor. Like,
I
genuinely,
know
that
it's
was,
going to be a hurdle just because of the first semester.
yeah, it was about a 2.8 going after first year,
Yeah.
which I know I was in a terrible position.
So let's talk a little bit. I think you're a pretty dynamic speaker. You're pretty, when people talk to you, I think you draw them in, which is good. Plus, you're doing a very difficult major. So I think that gave us comfort around, okay, he has intellectual capacity. It's just a function of he's didn't fully apply himself. He was like exploring
Yeah,
his first
yeah.
year. So talk to me a little bit about just once you joined, once you got in with us, what we did. Did we remove the GPA from the resume, I assume?
We did.
Yes.
I so the nice part about Alex, especially just being at University of Toronto, is he's right here. He's in Toronto. So I remember going in person with him, sitting down at one of our libraries, and he was just like, "Okay, so let's go over your resume." He was like, "Okay, first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna get rid of that GPA. That's probably like your Achilles heel right now. You need to get that up." And he was very clear with it. He didn't sugarcoat it, which I appreciated very much because I think I needed to hear that as well. But
Yeah.
it was like, if you want to land a finance role, this has to be a lot higher. You
Yeah.
have to start to really apply yourself. He was like, "What do you know about finance?" And I was like, "Honestly, I know lick all about finance. Like, I really just know nothing." And he
Yeah.
was like, "Okay, so we're gonna have to work on that as well. We're gonna have to work on your 7 stories." And so he just sent me to the sort of just running. And it was good for me because at that point it was like that last month of summer. So I had a lot of time to just crafting those, getting those ready. And that really helped me, I would say.
You're coming into kind of second year in Canada that the recruiting, it sounds like you're going for finance/banking type roles.
Yeah.
You have a little bit more time in Canada than you do in the US, but typically it's still second semester in spring in second year. So tell me, like, as you're now suddenly you have all these engineering classes again, and you got to get the GPA up. So talk to me, like, it sounds like you made some good progress that last month of summer. Then did you just completely flip and your focus go right back to school, or what? How did you balance all that, or had you started your networking?
Yeah. So I think the one thing that I knew was there's two ways to get past that GPA hurdle. Either your technicals are insane, and during if you ever land an interview, you're able to really convince the interviewer that you really know what you're doing and you'd be excellent at the job.
Yep.
Or the other option is to develop those relationships very early on,
Yep.
so that when you're applying, you let them know, and those kind of help you as you go through the process.
Yeah.
So I chose the latter, obviously, because I was like, I have to struggle with my engineering classes as well. I don't know exactly know if I have time to study the full finance stuff at
Yeah.
that point. And the other thing to it, I'll be honest, is I did put some of the Wall Street Oasis stuff on the back burner just because I got hit with classes and
That's why
exams.
I was asking. I'm
And
like,
so
how did
what
you even during your first semester, second year? Because you had to. If your GPA was low again,
exactly,
over.
exactly. It would have been like the axe on the foot.
Yeah.
And that's what Alex had told me as well. He was like, look, if you're here and there on the deadlines a bit, it's fine. That accountability matrix for you is basically for you to track your own progress, for you to see how comfortable you are.
Yeah.
But if your GPA is lower, now you're going to kill yourself with that.
It's done. Yeah.
So I obviously worked on the relationship building. I had a bunch of coffee chats in fall semester. And then the other nice part about it was that I ended up landing a VP role in my finance club as well, in my engineering finance club, just because of the relationships I'd made there.
Nice.
And that helped me as well because now we have alumni coming in and they're like, okay, this kid's actually like someone important.
Mhm.
And I also got to host an event with an individual named Som Safe because of some networking that I was able to get done. And he was able to come in. And he had a big firm here. He has a firm called Purpose Investments, which is about $25 billion.
Wow.
So because of that pressure that I put early on in the summer towards the end, where I was like, let me get some stuff going for me, it's snowballed in. And so my main thing in fall semester was go on coffee chats, study.
Yeah.
That's how I was living my life mainly.
And so talk to me a little bit by the end of the year, how many one-on-one calls had you done or chats or whatnot or in persons?
So I want to say I was going on at least about two a week, like the kickoff of fall semester to like basically the end of fall semester. And so that was about 8 people. And now these would be obviously like good quality. I
Yeah.
would obviously be blasting off messages and stuff and then following up after a week.
Mhm.
But as being in my situation, I knew that firstly, I'd have to target slightly senior individuals who were more in charge of recruiting.
Yeah.
And then if I did go on a coffee chat with someone who wasn't in charge of recruiting, I'd have to figure out, who was potentially in charge of recruiting at that firm. Because it's the same thing in the US as it is here. You
Yeah.
have your captains for your schools, they filter through the applications, they're going to tell you who's good, who's not. And so you have to be able to get with that captain and be like, hey, trust me, I know my GPA is low, but I can still do it.
Or was it something else? LinkedIn.
So the alumni network is actually pretty bad.
Okay.
You can drop them a message through that portal, it just doesn't go through. So my main strategy was go LinkedIn and go emails. If they connected with me, I'd obviously try to push for the emails. Sometimes I would just also use that same email draft I have on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And I actually surprisingly realized that a lot of the times my LinkedIn success was higher than my email success, which there were a few months where I would just be going on coffee chats because LinkedIn would be doing me really nice. But on average, I would be getting like one hit from the email maybe every 2 weeks. And it was just something that I guess was maybe like different here up in Canada, but it was just interesting to me.
When you say email, do you mean cold email or do you mean after they connected with you on LinkedIn?
After I connected with them on LinkedIn, then moving into email,
It was,
that also surprisingly had a lower kind of rate for me, which was just, I guess it just works for you the way it does. And I just figured
yeah.
out a strategy that was working.
Was this group, so you targeted a little bit more senior? Are we saying like VPs, MDs kind of level or just only MDs?
Obviously, I wanted to go after a couple of MDs. That's very hard. So my MD chats were like pretty limited to maybe about, I'll be honest, I think I know three now, like three actual. And again, it's not solely in investment banking, it's like across sales and trading and stuff as
Sure,
well.
sure,
But
sure.
I was going after EDs, VPs, and like I would try with MDs. Obviously, I wouldn't be able to get too many of those. Those are like, they'll see this kid emailing and they'll be like, who is this guy?
So,
Sometimes you get lucky, but sometimes you don't.
so
So it's really just a numbers game in that sense.
we're approaching recruiting around February, March time frame in your second year. You at this
Yep.
point have
Yep.
done, it's been what, like 5 months. So if I would call it 30 to 40 chats with people, talk to me a little bit about at this point, are you able to do any sort of technical interview prep? Are you doing mocks with Alex a lot? What's going on as you're
Yeah.
leading up into networking?
Yeah,
Do
so
you feel
this
better?
is actually
Did you have high grades? You know?
so that's the thing, right? I went from basically having a 2.8 to having a 3.4.
Oh my gosh.
I was nearly on, so I was pretty close to Dean's List. I still kicked myself over it. I fumbled one course just a little bit,
Yeah.
which would have put me there. But yeah, exactly to your point. So that December break, I realized, okay, my GPA came back and I was like, we're good. The nice thing about it is that since general engineering, I think this is true at most schools, you're very non-exclusive to your major. None of the classes that I took in my first year were actually applicable to my major. So
Mm.
I was able to say my major GPA
Yeah.
is 3.4, which again, that's a little bit of a nuanced thing, but that's something that I actually learned from Alex. He was like, why don't you throw on your major GPA instead of your CGPA? And I was like, am I not lying to them?
No, you
Did
say
did
major.
any of your
Yeah,
first
it's fine.
are any of your first year
They're
classes
just
really
going to
relevant to you?
suspect that your grades are much lower. Your classes outside your major.
Exactly. That's the only thing, right? That, and I'm pretty sure they would know that as well.
Yeah.
But so I was able to do that. And then in that December period, basically the other reason that I had gotten into the academy, the biggest reason, in my opinion, I think we talked about this a lot when I was initially joining, the courses.
Yeah.
So when I was doing that accounting course, obviously I was able to pick up and learn the things pretty quickly. And I was like, okay, this format works for me.
Yeah.
The quizzes work for me. And then obviously that certification at the end is nice because as an engineer, I have nothing to go with. But now I get something which accredits me and is, yes, you can do this. Yes, he can. He knows how to build a DCF. He knows how to do accounting. I sat down, I did the accounting course, I did the advanced accounting course, I did the DCF course because I was thinking those two would be the most essential. Then obviously you have the investment banking interview prep that you can just spend 4 hours and you can just go through. And then the other part to it was I had that 400 questions to break into Wall Street guide. And that's a little outdated, obviously, and it's very US centric because some of the questions obviously don't apply to Canada, but I just kept going through it repeatedly. And so I was running mocks with some of my peers from the club as well. When I felt I was really comfortable with the concepts, then I would go to Alex and
Mm.
I would wait for him to give me the hard questions. So I would see, okay, this is where I'm going down. And he was very good with that because he has this like list of questions. He has his own data bank as well that he knows, like I think Canadian banks do use to an extent. And he hit me with those. Some of those were hard and they would trip me up. And the nice part about him is he would stop. He would be like, okay, this is where you're going wrong. This is the concept you need to go study.
Yeah.
Like almost at some points, it felt like I had a finance tutor during these like 30-minute chats, which was really good for me because I don't know a lick about finance. So for him to sit down with me and help me through that prep was amazing.
Yeah, he's awesome. Did you ever go to any of the the live boot camps, or was it more just like drilling one-on-one, you're focusing on your classes or with?
Honestly, yeah, it was more the one-on-one stuff. I really wish I'd gone to some of the boot camps, especially I think the modeling ones, the financial modeling.
You
That
still
one would
can.
have
You
been
still can.
nice.
You're still welcome to join.
I know, and I'm
Yeah.
probably going to at some point this summer because I
Yeah.
think it's just a really good opportunity, and I just want to solidify myself further in these concepts now.
Let's just go into recruiting. It sounds like you're doing all the right things. You're getting the mocks done. You're practicing with not just your fellow students, but you're getting more realistic reps with Alex. When things open up, are you nervous that you're not going to get any processes? Because still GPA, it's a major GPA, but it's still very competitive. So there's no guarantee that you're going to get a lot of first rounds or anything. So talk to me a little bit about how that played out. I assume you applied everywhere, all the big five.
Yeah, exactly.
Tell me how it played out.
I actually ended up applying to about 7 different banks. Evercore obviously had its recruiting here, and we had our recruiting session with Evercore, and our club was spearheading that on campus.
Nice.
I really had a really good connection with one of the VPs, I thought. I was on a high where I was like, he likes me. We coffee chatted about twice, once before I was leaving for December break, and then after I came back. So I was like, okay, this is going to go great. I'm probably going to at least get a first round at Evercore. Now, Evercore is an elite boutique. So that with a 3.4 GPA, only one sort of consulting experience and then a couple of other experiences
Was it?
wasn't really going to happen. It was a bit of a long shot. I knew that.
Yeah.
Anyways, Evercore was one of the first ones to open up. They opened up on 1st January, got my application in. And then after that, the order was a little weird. So I was going to apply to National because I had a good connection there, but that didn't end up working out because I didn't realize that National only opened up on their website and they only open up on their own portal.
Got it.
So National was out the window. That was one of the ones that I wanted to apply for, didn't get to. So I got Evercore and I applied to RBC. I knew the captain there, but it turns out there's actually 2 captains there.
Mm,
So one of them got my application and the one that I chatted to didn't.
that was unlucky.
Because
Okay.
that was just a very unlucky situation. But I heard the interviews for RBC were pretty brutal and a lot of people just flat out got rejected. Then I also thought that CIBC would have been good for me, knew an ED there, applied, knew the team captain as well. But I got to the team captain a lot later.
Yeah.
But I remembered like the advice that Alex gave me was look, put your application in. If you can chat with them after as well, that's still valuable. And that's what I was able to do. It really wasn't going great. I'll be honest, up until April, it wasn't going great. So I was in a pretty difficult position. But at that point, I had an introduction from one of my other mentors to a good friend of his who worked at one of the banks as an ED. I was at Scotia.
Mhm.
And so I had that introduction. And obviously, having had those 7 stories prepared, it was like just one of the basic things in any coffee chat is just tell me about yourself. Give
Yeah.
them a brief background. And that kind of thing, being able to do that in 1 minute flat and giving them a nuance, like a story that you haven't really like memorized, but something that you can flow through is always nice. And then we just really connected and he really liked me. And this is the other part. This is actually one time where I think Alex's advice might have actually saved me.
Yeah.
So I was sitting down. It was at like 9 on a Wednesday. This guy, so the court, we coordinated the coffee chat that hour. And I'm sitting down there and it's 9:10. And at 9:15, I drop Alex a message being like, hey, he hasn't come. What do I do?
Yeah.
In my opinion. Looking back on it, I think this might have actually saved my banking career, which is why when I say I got lucky, I got really lucky. And Alex being up at 9:15 at that time was a godsend. And he texted me, usually wait a half an hour. And then in the future, they might be more inclined to help you because they see that you waited for
Mm-hmm. They owe you one.
them. At 9:32, I was just getting up to go and he calls me up and he's, hey, you still downstairs? And I think a part of him might have just felt bad that he kept this kid waiting for half an hour, but that just went really well. And he got me into the Scotia process. And then obviously the interviews went off. My opinion was this, and I think this was something that Alex and I agreed on. My technicals, my ability to interview were solid. It was just about getting to that interview stage, which was the hard part for me, especially with the GPA.
No, that was really interesting. I think talk to me a little bit about like that call or that chat that went really well with him after he's half hour, 40 minutes late, whatever. By the time he shows up, he gets downstairs. Was he apologetic? And then more specifically, why do you think it went so well?
So he was obviously he's not going to be apologetic. He was just like, yeah, he was just like, let's get to it. Like not super apologetic or anything, which completely totally fine. Like
Yeah.
obviously they're busy. That's
Yeah.
one of the things that I realized is my schedule, even if I have classes, are going to get moved around. I might have to catch up on lectures after just because But I think the reason it just went well is because we had very similar interests and we had very similar values and like work ethics in the way we approached our careers.
Okay.
And I was able to connect with him on that. And then the other thing is that
He broke into banking from a non-traditional background.
non-traditional career as well.
Got it.
And so that's where we like really lined ourselves up. And he was like, look, I know coming from a guy who's also in STEM, this was like the real kind of kicker is that we both connected on that STEM basis. He was like, it can be hard to juggle all the things, but I know finance is also one of those things that you can really study for.
Yeah.
There's a lot of guides out there, there's a lot of resources. And
Mhm.
so if you study for it, I think you got it, kid. That sort of reassurance. And he was like, okay, this chat's gone pretty well. So what do you want to do next? So I was like, look, I'd appreciate if you could get me in the process, if you could help me get the ball rolling, and if I could get to that interview stage. I don't know if you'll get to the interview stage, but I'll get you in the process. From there, it's up to you. Got me in the process. Scotia's banking, like the way their application works, and I don't know if you're familiar with this, they are resume less here. So I don't submit anything. They look at my LinkedIn, they look at my transcript, and they look at something called a Plum profile to see how you would fit
Oh,
in.
I know Plum.
Now,
Yeah, yeah. It's like similar.
yeah,
They have that over here for certain banks. It's not called Plum. It's another one called Suited. Very similar psychometric evaluation.
yeah, exactly. And so part of me always wondered whether there was like a right answer to those questions. Like some of them, especially like the personality ones, maybe not so much,
Mhm.
but the psychometric ones definitely have the right evaluation.
Yep. Tell me a
Yeah.
little bit of just okay. So I won't get you into the first round interview. I'll get you into the process. What do you mean by that? He'll get you into the Plum, like you'll be able to submit that, or is everyone invited to the Plum evaluation?
Everyone's invited to the Plum evaluation and stuff, but the critical difference is that he can introduce me to HR slightly earlier. So he introduced me to HR like a month before they were going to kick off.
Got it.
And then I also remembered that my club had an event with Scotia's HR.
Mm.
So I remember seeing her in that 1 month span twice and just being a face that she recognizes and knows and being like, hey, how's it going? You're obviously emulating that energy, which you need to get past those HR rounds, especially when they're vetting you. And I think the fact that the recommendation came from him when I let him know my application was in, I think he probably did. I don't know how much happens on the back.
Yeah.
And I do think that a lot did happen just because I feel like having gone through all those rejections to finally get that one acceptance, I'm guessing he did vouch for me. That would be my hope. But again, I don't know. Maybe he didn't. Maybe the HR just really liked me. But essentially, HR pulled my profile aside. And then the next stage was the group coffee chat.
Talk to me about that group. It's very awkward. I know. I've heard about this. So talk to me about the group coffee chat and where was it? It was just Zoom or
So that's the thing. My hope and expectation was this is going to be like that kind of kumbaya moment. You're going to all be sitting in a coffee shop together, or you're going to be sitting in the office
yeah.
having coffee together. It's going to be an opportunity for you to have a discussion more than just like a targeted interview.
Yeah.
I first find out it's a Zoom link.
Yeah.
The next thing I find out is that the structure goes, you're going to answer, then you're going to answer, then you're going to answer.
Oh.
So they go through the questions, and so we just answer them, and it just worked out.
What types of questions are like asking you to like situational kind of ones or more like technical?
Okay, first question, tell me about yourself. So that's an opportunity for you to also get to know the other individuals. And I was luckily fortunate enough to be able to go first, and then they would like circle back. Once the first question had done, I was just like, okay, you guys are incredible. This is really cool to see. I'm just excited to be getting to know you guys. Was part of it fluff? Yes. Was part of it true? Yes. I thought these were incredible people who were very competitive applicants.
Yeah.
It's going to be hard for me to potentially get through this next round. But I also was pretty confident in my abilities and my preparation as well. The next question was, talk us through a time that you've done some modeling or you have some experience.
Mm.
So I was able to go back to my internship, go back to a financial model that I built there, and I was able to talk through that. And I was also able to talk through like more explicitly, directly relating to banking. I was like, if you were talking specifically like a DCF, stock pitch. I've done a couple of stock pitch competitions, and I can just talk towards those as well with
Yeah.
my club and stuff. And then the third question was talk to us about an instance where you had a weakness, how you overcame that weakness, and specifically, is that still a continued weakness of yours? And I'd refined that and looked it over again and again. So
You're right.
that was a little floater for me to just put away.
Did you feel like having other candidates listening to your answers in that format, did it at all throw you off? Because I think like other people looking at you while you're doing this, did it, or were you just you had done this so many times it was fine? You weren't nervous at this point?
I
Because
think
it was your first real process, right? You had mocked a lot, so you but
yeah, exactly.
how
So
did you
part
feel?
of me was a little bit nervous, but then I'd run through that story so many times in so many different ways. And I think the nice part is it's bullet points. It's not a script. Because if you have a script, you miss one word, you're gonna
Oh,
forget
you
everything.
mess up.
And then you're pausing in between your weakness story, and they're like, "So are you sure this isn't your weakness?" I just gone through it so many times, and with Alex and with everyone, and doing my mocks and stuff, I felt pretty confident. And I don't think I get shy in front of a group of people. I think it was just an opportunity for me to show my stuff and for them to do their best and just leave it all out there, honestly.
Got it. Okay, so you're finishing up here. Tell me, when did you hear that? And then you have a super day, right? So tell me what happened after that.
So actually, there was one more round before the Super Day.
Oh, okay.
So then after that, I hear back about a day or two later. They're like, "Congrats! The next round is in person at our office. It's just two analysts. It's going to be technical slash behavioral kind of
Ooh,
questions."
okay, here we go.
And so this is the part where I was a little bit unlucky in my networking. I hadn't emphasized Scotia enough, so I didn't know that many analysts there.
Got it.
But what I did know is I knew a couple of the interns who had finished up last summer, upperclassmen with me,
Yeah.
and they were able to talk me through. They were like, "Yeah, this analyst is this person," and I was like, "Hey, do you mind if I mention your name to them so they know that maybe this kid hasn't been talking to us, but he's been talking to our interns. He knows what's up." So as soon as I walked into the interview, obviously you say your hi hellos, and I was just like, "I'm so sorry, but so and so mentioned that they know you. Do you potentially know them? Because they're one of my upperclassmen. They're a really close friend of mine." And they're like, "Oh yeah, we love them. They got their return offer. They're headed back.
Yeah.
It's good that you know them." And I was like, "Perfect. Get that opening in." But
Yeah.
yeah, so that was like the next round.
Nice. And would you say the technicals were difficult, down the middle, on any unexpected weird ones?
Mostly down the middle. There was one weird one, which was an accounting one. And again, this goes back to the fact that I never actually had like a formal accounting education.
Yeah.
So obviously I knew like the basic accounting concepts and I knew your asset write downs, your asset write ups. One of the ones that kind of tripped me up was when they sold the asset for a lower value than it was actually worth. And so it was like a pseudo write down, but not really. And it messed me up a little bit. So
Yeah.
that one was like obviously, and part of me, when I was going through that question, I was fumbling around a little bit because they could tell engineering kid doesn't really have a background in accounting. So they helped walk me through it. And I think what they were looking for is, can we walk this kid to the answer?
Yeah.
Is he willing to learn or is he going to get frazzled? Then they asked me a couple questions after that as well.
Yeah.
So going through it, when I messed up initially, I was a little bit worried, but then I was like, okay, calm down. Obviously, you're going to get something wrong. But they walked me through it, got the next few right as well. And they were like, okay, do you have any questions for us? I had a couple questions prepared that I bounced off Alex, and he said they were good questions. And so I just talked with them on that. I walked out of there and I was like, I messed up one accounting question, and I know I'm probably screwed now. I
You
was
thought it
like,
was over,
it's
but
over for me.
I think probably not, because it's not just do you get all the technicals, like you said, as an engineering student. You also made yourself more likable just by showing you knew someone that they knew and liked right out of the gate. So it's like it framed the entire conversation of, hey, we like this guy because he's friends with the other guy we like.
I honestly think it was actually a very funny situation. I was pitching to them Aritzia because that's a stock pitch that I'd done prior. It was a very funny situation because one of the interviewers, his girlfriend, worked at Aritzia. So he really knew that business model and stuff. And so he was talking to me about it. And he was like, "So why do you think their sales were down like last year?" And I hadn't done this much research and I could have tried fluffing it up. And I was like, I'm guessing it relates to COVID, but the honest answer is I don't know. And I think maybe it was that attitude that they were looking for, that the kid's willing to say they don't know.
Yeah, yeah,
Because I think to some level, these interviews are like a stress test to see how far they can push you before.
you crack.
I'm not going to try to lie to you. I'm not going to try to fluff anything up or make anything up. I just
Yeah.
don't know the answer.
That's true. It makes you even more likable when you're just like, I have no idea, but I'll get back to you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
for sure. Okay, so you're coming out of this kind of, we'll call it a second round. You're thinking, I'm not going to make it to the super day at this point because I got that one accounting question. So tell me, how long did you have to wait before you were invited to a super day?
So this is the period. It was about like a 3 day period where they told us they'd get back to us by like in a day and a bit. Luckily, this was the godsend. I had another friend who was going through the process like at the same time I was.
Yeah.
She was also interviewing for the same firm. And we're both like, okay, we haven't heard anything in the first day. About to give up hope. Second day, we were like, okay, it's over. We didn't get it. And then by the third day, all of a sudden we get an email and we get it at the same time and we immediately call up each other and we're like, yo, did you get it? And we're like, we both got it.
Nice.
And so I was incredibly ecstatic. I was like, oh my God, I can't believe it. One of the things I'm going to do is I'll talk to those analysts later on. And I'm going to be like, I'm just going to have the conversation with them because I really appreciate them. I
Yeah.
think the fact that they were there and they stood out to me and they let me go through that next round was pretty big. But also at the same point, when I was going through this, I was just constantly dropping that ED. Like I think I was a bit of a pest to him, honestly, but I was letting him know, hey, just finished up the first round. Hey, just finished up the second round. These were my interviewers. They were really nice. I just wanted to keep you in the loop.
Yeah,
But yeah,
that's great. And okay, so you get that email with you and your friend. You're both super excited. How far out is the super day from that email?
Super Day was about a weekend away, a weekend and a day. So I had a weekend and a day. And the crazy part about this is when my exams were for second semester.
Okay.
So I'm studying for my exams, but at the same time, I know my exams aren't nearly as valuable as what this could be potentially. So I'm really grinding in and locked in on this, and my exams are a little bit in the back burner. Obviously, I had my concepts and stuff down because I knew this was going to happen, but the exams were a bit in the back burner. This was like my main kind of gotta lock in, gotta focus on this for sure.
So talk to me about that kind of last week leading up to the super day. Was it something obviously back in office now, this time more than just a 2-on-1? It's going to be a whole round. So talk to me a little bit about the format of the super day. Was it mostly behavioral? Was there a little more technical still that you had to jump through, or talk to me about that?
So they had one portion which was behavioral with two VPs, and then one portion which was technical and behavioral with two VPs. And it was like a back to back, obviously, like the Super Day,
At the same time,
but one after another.
one after four. So four.
Yeah, exactly.
Some are even more in the US. Sometimes it's six, or sometimes there's 2-on-1s. It depends on the bank.
Yeah. So those kind of that was like the bit where I was like, okay, obviously part of it was definitely like the preparation. I actually got really lucky because I was talking to, I think the Wall Street Oasis had a deep roster, which had someone who'd worked at Scotia previously who potentially knew these individuals. And he knew two of them, I think, or maybe one of them. And he was like, he gave me some good advice. He was like, hey, make sure you actually like really understand and know the deal that you're going to talk about and see if you can make it a deal that they actually might know. So
Yeah.
I picked like a Sir slash Fig deal, which was really interesting to me. Firstly, the guy got up one morning at 6 a.m. to have a prep interview with me, just because I was like, I got to study the rest of the day. And I obviously have my exams and stuff, but I also want to run a mock. And he was like, let's do it. Get up at 6. We'll run through the deal as well with you. So
Yep.
we know exactly how you're going to pitch that deal.
Yep.
That was part one of it. Part two of it was he actually gave me the deal. So he obviously had access to one of his, like, I think Capital IQ accounts. He pulled the deal for me. I don't have access to Capital IQ, so
Yep.
I wasn't able to pull the deal.
Amazing.
But he was able to get me that deal. He was able to get me like the overview and he was able to walk me through it.
Yep.
And really, I think the guy really put his heart in his sleeve for me. He put it all out there for me. And
Yep.
I'm just very grateful to him in that sense because he helped me out.
So talk to me like when you're in the interview, and I assume you ended up having to do that deal walkthrough and
I
whatnot.
did. I did. Both interviews asked me about it.
And how did it go? Did it go off well because of that prep? Was it a little bit shaky still? What was it? What would you say?
I think it definitely went off very well. I got fortunate because one of the coverage groups, the VPs and from one of the coverage groups hadn't really read it too much about that deal. He knew about it, but he hadn't read about it like holistically. So I got lucky with that. And then the other part to it is he helped me nail down that deal on the prep. So I really knew it. And then obviously when they ask you about, tell us about a deal that interests you, that was part of it. But then the other part was I just wanted to be like really honest with them as well. Cause I felt part of this might seem fake. I was like, I can talk you through a deal that I saw Scotia did was very interesting. And then another deal that I thought was really cool was
Yeah.
Goldman Sachs actually advising on the acquisition of the Celtics. Because that had happened at that time as well. And I was like, I'm a big basketball guy. So to me, this was like a shakeup. And it was like,
Yeah.
hey, private equity investors can now own a sports team, which I knew was a thing, like with
Yep.
the Dodgers and stuff. But it was just cool to me. And I talked them through that as well.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I'm a huge Celtics fan. But anyways.
I'm not a Celtics fan. I personally don't like the Celtics, but I just thought the deal was cool,
Yeah.
especially now with the Dodgers, like with the Lakers as well,
Yeah.
with Guggenheim picking them up.
Yeah.
That was insane. I'm very
So
excited about that.
talk to me a little bit about just so you're going through this super day. Things are going well. Did you feel like when you finished, did you feel like you good about it, or was like I have no idea? And tell me about how long you had to wait, and then tell me about the result, obviously, or when you
Yeah,
heard.
yeah. So the behavioral section went really well. Actually, one of the things that came up was my GPA because they were really out of questions, and then they flipped through my transcript,
Yeah.
and they were like, "So tell us a little bit about your transcript." And luckily, I sat down with this and really thought about how to pitch it in the right way. So that was good. That worked out.
How did you frame it? Or you don't have to go through the whole thing, but like maybe just overview how you framed it so that people can.
Yeah, yeah. So it's really all about the growth. You need to be able to show them that you grew. And I had that sort of that jump. So I was like,
Mhm.
think about me as a stock, guys. Hasn't been the best one. But if you really look at it, I've given you about a 27% return in this past quarter. Now, if you keep that on track, I'm going to be at that level, if not higher. As an engineering student who's coming out of with a non-traditional background, you can look at my beta as well as if you treat me as a stock, and it's a little higher. But
Yeah.
what I'm basically trying to tell you is you put me in that environment. Once I figure out how to learn, I can perform at a very high level, very consistently. And that's what I can show you with my GPA because this is me when I figured out how to study and I was able to just raise it up.
Yeah.
So that's how I pitched it to them. First half, they were definitely like a little laughing. They were like, this guy's pitching himself as a stock to us. And then the second half, obviously, they were like, okay, he's got that potential.
I think the second part of it, though, around how you did answer the question of, okay, you see how once I learned how to study, I think that's really good advice. Of course, it's easier said than when you have a big jump like you did. If you had the
Yeah.
reverse, it's much harder to do that. And so I think, yeah, in terms of how you'd frame it, it would still be something around no excuses. You learned a lot, but you've been very active in clubs around campus. And so you've spread yourself a little bit thin last semester. Okay, so tell me
I
a little
think,
bit about, yeah, what happened? You walk out. It's nice to meet you. Thank you so
yeah.
much. And then,
So behavioral went well. Technically, I think I messed up one question as well.
yeah.
And then there was one question where they wanted to see whether I would be like willing to learn. So those were like the two. And yeah, so I walked out of it. I felt good.
Yeah.
I felt I'd left it all out there. There were like a couple points where obviously you go back through that period in your head and you're like kicking yourself. You're like, damn, that was something I could have answered a little bit better. I should have structured that a little bit better.
Yeah.
But left the interview, felt pretty good. And then I just waited. So the interview finished around mid-April, and I didn't hear back till, which again, this was like, because they said they were going to be in touch soon. I didn't hear back till at least like the second or third week of May.
Oh,
Second week of May, if I'm
you
not
think it's
mistaken.
over at this point? Because typically it's,
I had fully given up. After the 30th of April, I was like,
why do you think it took so long? Were there several waves? Were you in the first wave potentially of like Super Day they were doing?
I do think I was in the first wave because I received it around the same time my friend did. And I know she's incredible. She's a really great
Yeah.
commerce student. She has that background and stuff as well. But I think, I don't know. I talked to some analysts and they said there was some stuff going on internally, which they were trying to figure out with headcount and stuff.
Yep. So then, what happens in mid-May, late May? It's a phone call or what, unexpected, an email? What happened?
It was actually a phone call. So I'm just sitting there. I had my research position obviously for the summer, and then I was working through some other stuff. But I get a phone call and they're like, hey, is this now a good time to chat? I was like, and that was a great time to chat. And the one thing I can pick up is I feel like I'm decent at reading emotions and the vibes. So I was able to tell her tone was a little happy. My hopes were getting a little up. They were moving upward. And then she's like, I just wanted to congratulate you. And then the moment she said those words, I was like,
Oh
I
my,
zoned out. For the first like 10 minutes, she was telling me about the process and the next steps, and I was gone.
you're,
I was in my own head. I was like, yeah. And then for the next hour and two, I was like, okay, before I call anyone, before I let anyone know, is this actually real? Did I mishear her? Am I in a dream? It's because these kinds of things that, like, obviously this sounds so cliche, Patrick, but it was just a culmination of my effort and I couldn't believe it.
That's amazing. Yeah, definitely a high hurdle, tough bar to clear. I think you did a lot of things right in terms of the networking. Just amazing story. I assume you eventually, once you came out of you ended up telling everybody, all the people you had networked with, thank you so much and all that.
Exactly. I think I'm still actually going around and like having some of those chats, still scheduling them because I think it's just important to like not let those relationships go. Like you're sure you're not recruiting anymore, but still keeping those relationships on the street is very important because you never know when they could be handy next. So
Yeah, I always say the easiest time to network is when you don't need it.
exactly. Yeah, that's so true. I think the conversations also just get a lot easier because now they know you're not coming to them with that. So there's like a different atmosphere to the conversation as well.
Totally. So looking back on the whole process, anything you would have changed besides getting a higher GPA that first semester to make it easier on yourself?
Honestly, I think technical prep. I would have jumped into that a little sooner.
Yep.
That would have been a big portion of it. And then the other big portion is just being more consistent and more diligent in how I was approaching the matrix. Because
Yep.
at the end of the day, you guys have brought a lot of students through this.
Yeah.
The recipe to success. And you know that it's those steps. And so being diligent with that matrix would have been really good. But I think overall, other than that, I'm just glad I had Alex around, man. This guy,
Yeah.
from that one time, that 30 minutes he told me to wait, that saved me. Then the capital IQ, helping me pull that sort of that stock part, that saved me. And then just him being a sounding board and just being there for me to chat to after those interviews. Every step of the way, the guy was in my corner. And if I hadn't had him in my corner, I don't think it would have gone nearly as well.
It's awesome, man. Yeah, I think you did a lot right, staying on track with all the assignments and stuff. Part of the issue was you just had to focus on school really heavily that semester prior to recruiting. So it is what it is, but you got the major GPA up high enough to pass. And so I'm really happy for you. I think it's a great story. And yeah, thanks for sharing with all of us.
No, thank you so much, Patrick. I think you guys checking in on me, you guys making sure that I was being there, and then Alex as well. And then just the vast resources that you give in terms of just the technical prep,
Yeah,
that really saved me. So that
awesome.
was able to bridge that gap for me. So
Thanks so much.
appreciate you guys as well.